Harry Nilsson then invited me back to Studio A. I was in Studio B doing my album, and for 2 hours I worked with Harry Nilsson, having the most blissful time of my life. He was asking me about bass sounds and whether I thought the volumes were right. He was mixing Son of Dracula for the movie. It was just an amazingly normal time, like talking to Eric on his podcast. Then in walked Ringo Starr, 2 hours, 2.5 hours later. The room changed when Ringo walked in.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock. I'm Eric Senich. This is the podcast for those about to read and rock. Before we let you know about this new episode and invite our returning guests, just want to let you know about a great deal that we have through the podcast. Listeners and viewers can get 15% off classic rock merchandise at oldglory.com. Use the code BookedOnRock. The link is in the show notes, or you can find it at bookedonrock.com under my deals. All right, so our returning guest, a friend of the podcast, Barry Greenfield. Barry is a veteran Canadian singer-songwriter known for his evocative lyrics, soulful melodies, and timeless storytelling. Emerging in the 1970s, he made his mark with heartfelt folk rock songs, including the cult favorite New York is Closed Tonight, earning national airplay and critical acclaim. In 2025, he released his first book titled My Journey to Blue Sky, which we had him on for. He's back with a new book titled All You Need Is Courage. Barry, it is great to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Couldn't be better. I'm a fan of the podcast, as you know, and I look forward to this with bated breath. Always a little bit nervous about anything that I have to do as an author or a songwriter, but always happy to take the challenge because all you need is courage, Eric.
Right. Well, that means you still love it. That's the thing.
I love it as much as when I was 15. I love it as much as any of the incidents that have been in and out of my life like a river. I get excited, still writing new songs and recording. And the new thing with writing a book is just a breath of fresh air and so good for my health and so good for my heart.
Yeah, and you have sent me the music that you've been creating, and it's powerful stuff. This is a time, I was wondering if you agree with this, but we're in these times where maybe the best music can come out. During turbulent times, the most passionate music can come.
Couldn't agree more. History has proven that, Eric. I don't understand really whether I am a protest songwriter, but I've always liked protest songwriters. And you're right, when there is fire in the hole, you try to put water on it, you know?
Now let's talk about the novel. Begins with a real moment, your audition for John Lennon. Just take us back, because I know we went over that in the first appearance, but take us back to that day, and what do you remember most vividly?
I think I remember most standing in front of Apple, looking at the steps into the building, walking into the building, walking up the steps to the main lobby, and looking at the huge painting of the Apple that was still unhung because Apple had only been open for a few days, and realizing that I had followed a dream and was living it. And then working with Derek Taylor and John Lennon was just the cherry on the pie. It was such an amazing experience that I have written 2 books about.
The book, it explores the path you didn't take. Why was that story you felt compelled to tell?
When I was offered a recording contract by Apple, I went to Hyde Park, and I was 17 years old. I had never played with another musician. I had trouble tuning my guitar. I would only been playing the guitar for 2 years, so chords like B seventh and F diminished were foreign to me, and I just felt like I wasn't ready. So I went back and I told them that I wouldn't take the offer, that I wasn't ready. I only wanted to be a songwriter, not a performer or a singer. And I felt great relief, but that was 1968 in May. And I've always wondered what would have happened if I would have taken the offer and been part of the first Apple release, which was Hey Jude, Mary Hopkins' song, Those Were the Days, um, Sour Milk Sea by Jackie Lomax, and the Van Dyke Band instrumental. And, one can never know. Jackie Lomax faded away. Mary Hopkins went on to international stardom. I just never, ever was attracted by fame. I just wanted to be a songwriter. So I refused the offer, but I've always wondered what would have happened if I had accepted the offer. So the book, All You Need Is Courage, is based on an imaginary fella who was 2 years older than me, called Adam Bond, who did accept the offer. And then the next 33 chapters are what happened if. I got the idea after watching the movie yesterday, the fantasy film about no one knowing that the Beatles existed. And I realized that I wanted to write a really positive outcome, not drugs and Badfinger. I wanted it to be happy. And so that was the experience of writing the book over 3-4 months.
I did see that movie. That's the one where at the end they show an older John Lennon who's an unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
It was a beautiful love story about two kids who fell in love, and music was a byproduct of the movie. But he made it very believable, the actor, and the director, Richard Curtis, did a wonderful job, as he did with Love Actually. And I just wanted to answer the question, which of course we will never know the answer to, if I would have said yes to John Lennon. And of course, the path not taken is an unknown path, so you can only imagine. But that's what I did with this book.
And Adam Bond, essentially your alternate self. Where did that name come from?
Well, Adam was the first, and I wanted an English name, and I ended up with Bond. And it was only about halfway through the book when I realized James Bond, and it made me laugh. And I then added a line to the book, my name is Adam Bond. I just wanted an English name because I'm English, and I wanted the fella to have English roots because I believe that English songwriters have a different root source than American songwriters. And I wanted Adam to be British.
You make it clear this is fiction grounded in real events. How did you balance authenticity with imagination?
That's an interesting question, Eric. And it's a good question, but I'm not sure how you can answer it because it isn't authentic. It is imagination. But I know a lot about George Harrison. I know a lot about John Lennon. I know a lot about Paul McCartney. I know a lot about John Paul Jones. I know a lot about Nicky Hopkins. And when I was writing about hanging and working with these individuals, I used my knowledge of how they spoke, how they worked. I did a lot of research. Like in 2026, you can research a lot on Google and AI. So you can find out clothes they wore, whether they smoked, whether they were diligent to some degree. You can find those things. So I tried to be, accurate and real. And 2 nights ago, my wife and I were watching on YouTube a Dick Cavett interview with George Harrison. I don't know what year it was, but it was after All Things Must Pass. And it struck me how his personality and sense of humor I had captured quite well in the book. Now, I've had 3 people read the book, you being the 4th. I don't know your opinions on it, but I guess I'm sitting here, so that must say something.
I love it.
But the 3 people that have read it are all authors, and they're all people I have never met. One lives in Nashville, one lives in London, and one lives in Toronto. Never met successful authors, all 3. And they all told me separately that it felt like it was not a novel. It felt like it was real because you got to know who George Harrison is because I go to his house, I hang with him and Patty, I have breakfast with them, we write a song together, all things that of course did not happen, but were easy for me to explain I've collaborated with a lot of famous people, and I know how it goes down, and they're not all the same, but there's a thread. And I just tried to use my 50 years of experience in the music business and my knowledge of the Beatles because I really wanted it to be a Beatle book.
The authenticity that I refer to partially would be also your experience in the studio. Like there's the description of what it's like to be in the recording studio and all those things you know about, people that you met, you work with, hung out with. You got some funny stories. What was the story from the Monkees?
Mike Nesmith.
Mike Nesmith,
Yeah.
So the authenticity is there, but then, you balance it out with that great imagination that you have. So I think it's a perfect blend.
Well, you nailed it. That's exactly what I did do. When I recorded my best album, which is called Blue Sky, I was in Los Angeles with the best musicians in the world, Larry Carlton, Jim Gordon, Joe Osborne, Larry Mahobrak, Larry Neptune. These were the best players in the world, and the ones that played with the Byrds and Simon and Garfunkel and Frank Sinatra. And when I wrote this book, All You Need Is Courage, about being in Abbey Road and being in Trident Studios, I was really sharing my experience with Larry Carlton, who is as good as Nicky Hopkins. And I just made the experience honest because Larry Carlton was kind, helped me a great deal, shaped my music a great deal. And in this imaginary tale, this novel, Nicky Hopkins plays that role. So that was very observant of you, Eric, because that wasn't an accident. That was a plan.
The chapter list reads almost like a journey through the late 60s music world. You mentioned it, the names. You open with John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin fame, then you move into George Harrison and John Lennon. Why structure chapters around specific iconic figures?
Because it's more interesting for the reader. John Paul Jones in 1968 was just coming into his own. He had worked a lot with Donovan, Dusty Springfield, and dozens of others as an arranger and as a guitar player and as a bassist primarily. He had also worked with Jimmy Page in a lot of these sessions, with a lot of these really big hits from 65, 66, 67, 68. He began playing with the Shadows. And I wanted to have a producer produce Adam Bond who was real. Everything is time accurate. So the dates I use in the book are dates when things actually happened. John Paul Jones was not a household name, but he was known in the industry from people who had worked with him at Trident and Olympic and stuff. So when it was time to get a producer, John Lennon said, I'm going to hire John Paul Jones. So I found out how tall he was. I found out how old he was. I found out whether he was married or not. I found out his wife's name. So the conversations when John Paul Jones comes into Apple to meet me are imaginary, but based upon data. He said, how old are you? I said, I'm 19. How old are you? I'm 22, because he was 22 in 1968. Then later, when I opened in the marquee for the New Yardbirds and a band called the Bakerville Blues Line, that was a real gig, and the date is real. And it was the first gig that the four Yardbirds, who became Led Zeppelin a week later, played. So I knew how big the marquee was. I knew how many seats they sold, 200 over room. I knew it was stacked with famous people because Jimmy Page was playing. And I was allowed to do 3 songs before the Baker Street Blues Band. And I picked 3 aggressive songs, which were the same 3 songs I played at the 12 Bar Club in London in 1974. And that was the most successful concert I've ever played, except for the one I did 3 months ago, which I think even went higher level. But the one in London was just a phenomenal. I headlined at the 12 Bar, which was one of the most famous clubs on Denmark Street. We had 350 people there. I came off with my shirt absolutely sweating, completely wet, and I made the marquee night with the New Yardbirds that night. So what happened to me at the 12 Bar Club happened to me for those 3 songs at the Marquee Club. I can't remember the date, but it's in the book.
So cool, though. But that's why you feel like you are there. That's the thing, the work that you put in.
It's the only way to write a book is to put your heart into it, and the only way to put your heart into it is to tell the truth. If you start bullshitting and lying and exaggerating, like I didn't steal the night of the marquee. The new Yardbirds were phenomenal, and I was just a footnote. But then at the next day or the next week, they got one line in the Melody Maker when they reviewed the concert, and they said Adam Bond made himself proud or something like that. And I've had those one-liners. When I played the 12 Bar Club, I got a one-liner in the Times, and it was the night of the show, and it was in the British Times, which was a very conservative newspaper, and they said, Canadian songwriting legend Barry Greenfield, a compadre of Leonard Cohen, is playing London tonight. Now, and then they gave them the time and all that stuff. I don't know if that sold any tickets or if anybody read it, but that was the same as the line that Adam Bond got. So there's a lot of truth in All You Need Is Courage, even though it's a novel. And I make that really clear in the preface. And I got legal stuff about, what you can do. So apparently you can get away with using living souls as long as you're not slanderous. So you can say Paul McCartney and I had lunch, but you can't say Paul McCartney sold me pot.
Interesting.
Isn't it? I did a lot of research on that because I was worried that I'd crossed an imaginary line, but I haven't.
Yeah. It's a similar challenge that I have as a podcaster with what you can copyright is a big thing.
Tell me, what kind of challenge is that?
Well, I had one before this where I was playing clips of music and they would get pulled down, especially if you want to put them on YouTube. So it became a frustration because, you put in for that show, it was good 14, 15 hours of time put in for an entire episode, from concept to getting all the audio, writing the script, recording it, editing it. And if it's going to get pulled down, so when you sign up for a podcast, you use these companies like I use Spreaker, they make you agree to a copyright agreement. Like you can't play this without permission. Now, as we know, we'll hear a lot of ones that do play them, and it's a chance that you take. If you get on their radar, it's a similar challenge, different in what you're saying. Obviously that's, slander, but there are things you have to work around as an author. You got to be careful, like images,
Absolutely.
Photos.
Yes, and you need to get permission for everything. And I thought about writing Paul McCartney and asking for permission, but I knew it was a fruitless exercise because he gets 15, 20 requests a day for shit, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to share with you for your listeners, my experience with YouTube when I was kicked off for 3 months.
You are? Okay.
One of my most proud projects is a thing that took 3 years to do, and that was my visit to Auschwitz. And I wrote 5 songs about my visit to Auschwitz, which are all on YouTube. And one of them was called, I'm not sure, can I use the F word on your station?
Sure. Oh yeah.
One was called Fucking Nazis. And for each song, I made a video. And Fucking Nazis started off with a swastika flag blowing in the wind, and then went through a series of videos of Hitler and fucking Nazis for the first 25 seconds, and then it went into the song. Because it was a long intro. It's a very aggressive sort of AC/DC kind of song, because that's what it has to be. And YouTube said that I was spreading hate literature by using the swastika. So, of course, they would allow you to appeal, but you're not really appealing. You're just talking to a computer. It's all computer. So I wrote to the person, which was actually a computer, saying, hey, man, I'm not spreading hate literature. I'm spreading love. And I was not honoring the Nazi regime. I was doing the opposite. The song is called Fucking Nazis. They just wrote back as if they didn't read it and said, you have 1 strike. You're banned for, how many, it was 3 weeks or 3 months?
I think it's 3 months. That's very frustrating. YouTube they're real strict with that.
Yeah, but it's not a they, it's a computer.
It's an it. Yeah, it's an AI scan.
Well, you can go on for days talking to Barry Greenfield about AI and about auto-tune and all that stuff and what it's done to music. And of course, I honor the Beatles like so many of my generation do, and they left the mistakes in, and you know, that's what makes it human art. And I've never had an editor do my books. I've done spell check and I've done grammar check and all that stuff because that's being polite to the reader. But I don't want someone to reform my thoughts because my thoughts are the art of why I'm an author and why I've been a songwriter for 6 decades. And every time I've taken people's advice for my songs, I've looked back 3 months later and thought, wow, they're a bit weaker because no one tells Bob Dylan, well, don't use that word, Bob. I know more than you do. And I was having a conversation in Malibu 20 years ago with one of my brothers, and that's Graham Gouldman, who is one of the greatest songwriters ever. And we're having this discussion, and the phrase he used, because he's a great wordsmith, was every fucker is a genius across the table. And I never forgot that because everyone has an idea that can make your art better to their liking. And I believe art should be, no one tells you how to paint, no one says use more green, or they shouldn't, and no one should tell an author or a songwriter how to improve their art, even though they're trying to. And I know editing is a huge part of film and a huge part of books, but it's not for me.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that as a podcast. Say, hey, you know what you should do? I should do what I'm doing. That's what I'll learn as I go, or I'll be inspired as I go to maybe try something. But some people mean well, but you're just kind of like, when it's something you have a passion for and it's your art, you got to be careful, especially if it's somebody like, for you, like if somebody who's not a musician saying, hey, you know what kind of song you should write?
Yeah.
But
yeah, and they might even be right. I mean, maybe they are better than you at picking interesting words and stuff. But then it's not art. Art is what comes from Eric. It's what comes from Barry. It's take it or leave it. It's I mean, obviously collaboration is a huge part of songwriting. I've collaborated with lots and lots of people, and George Harrison and John Lennon and other people played a role in writing Eleanor Rigby. They all had ideas. Ringo wrote Darning the Socks line. George wrote All the Lonely People. And that's collaboration. That's a different thing. That's when the art is being made. But when people read the art and then try to improve it, that's where I think it's not for Barry. And I know it sounds a little bit egocentric. I know it sounds a little bit arrogant, but I think it's just trying to stay pure.
That's all it is.
Blemishes and warts and all.
Yes, it's all it is. It's I know. I'm totally with you on that, man. Totally.
Well, that's why I like your channel, Eric, and I watch it all the time and years now. And it's because it's Eric. Like,
yeah. I hope it's sincere. There are things I try. I'm continually trying, and I'm like, let me try this for thumbnails for the and I'll just continually change because I have like that restless creativity, and I'm looking maybe to see, can I improve on that? And then sometimes I'll take a step forward, and I that step forward I'll stay with, but sometimes I'm like, oh, no, I'll step back, but you can't be afraid to take a little risk here and there too.
All you need is courage.
Yes.
And without courage, you can't be brave. And without bravery, you can't make art. Probably the bravest songwriter ever, well, maybe Dylan, but I'm going to just take a stab and say John Lennon. Like, if he would have played I Am the Walrus on an acoustic guitar to anybody other than George Martin, they would not have understood it, his madness, his creativity, his uniqueness. I think one of John Lennon's finest moments is I Want You, She's So Heavy. Now, another person can say, John, there's only 7 words in the song, or 11 words, whatever it is. It's not enough. You do the same thing over and over again, but that powerful chord pattern and line that George and John play in between those moments and then at the long, long tag is just brilliant. And instead of editing it as a fade, he snaps it on the 4-inch tape. No one ever did that before. So all you need is courage came from, like, John Lennon. When I walked into John Lennon's office in 1968, I imagine this is correct. I don't know if it's correct, but he said to me something to the effect of, you just walked in the door? Like, no one else has done that. And I said, well, you were on TV on The Tonight Show on May the 18th, and you said, with Paul McCartney sitting next to you, come to Apple, bring your songs, bring your poems, bring your screenplays, and there'll be no suits waiting for you. You invited me, and I think he was really, really, I don't know, make that really clear to the listeners and to you, but I think he thought, this kid flew from Canada. He's not a wealthy kid. I used all my money. I did use all my money. It was meant for university. And I flew from Canada because I believed he would see me. And sure and beholden, he saw me and he offered me a recording deal. I mean, who would have thunk it?
Wow. Yeah, the courage. The courage.
Ask a woman to marry you. Ask a man to marry you. Have a child. People that chase tornadoes, full of courage, following their passion. Don't talk minus action is nothing. Talk with action will get you somewhere.
Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. Let's talk about the first chapter a little bit more before we move into the others. You open it with the Twilight Zone. Why was that the perfect metaphor for stepping into Apple Records?
Yeah. Well, the thing about Apple Records was I met Derek Taylor first, and Derek took me through all of Apple, which was a maze of halls, and every single room was empty because they just opened a few days earlier. And the only people in the building were John, Yoko, the receptionist, a young 18-year-old Carnaby Street girl, and Derek Taylor. And it was like being in the Twilight Zone, walking through this really dilapidated office. It was not smart. It was not clean. It was not beautiful. It was just an old building in London in a very, very wealthy area called Mayfair. It wasn't in Carnaby Street or Chelsea. It was in a very wealthy area, which the Beatles liked. They liked being not where there's buskers or homeless in front. So it was the Twilight Zone, brother. And that's why I made that metaphor, because it felt like I've entered another world. And then walking into an office and seeing John and Yoko, it was bizarre because they were smaller than you thought. Everybody was smaller than you thought for some reason. And they were kind and loving.
I want to ask about a couple important characters. We're starting with Derek Taylor, who comes across as both a mentor and a guide. So tell us who he is and how you approach writing him as a character.
Derek Taylor was the key to the story, to my adventure at Apple, because I walked into Apple and I said to the receptionist, I'd like to meet, I'm here to meet John Lennon because he invited us from the Tonight Show. And she said, do you have an appointment? And I said, no. And she said, well, take a seat. And then this fella came out and I recognized him, the mustache, Derek Taylor, 1968. And Derek Taylor joined the Beatles in 1964. And he was a publicist and a writer, and he wrote some of the liner notes for the early albums. And he was fired by Brian Epstein. Then when Brian Epstein died in 68, we think by suicide, but we're not really sure, could have been fault, just taking the wrong pills at the wrong time. They rehired Derek Taylor when they opened Apple and made him head of media and head of marketing and head of publicity and whatever the right titles were in that period. So he came out and he knelt down beside me and he asked me if I'd made a cassette for John. And I said, no, I've never made a cassette. I've never recorded a song. He said, well, will you play the songs for me? So we went through this maze like the Twilight Zone. And then I played Derek 10 songs and he was flabbergasted. And he said, these are great. These are good songs. And then we walked into John's office and that's when John, based upon what Derek had said, asked me to record two of the songs. And the two songs they picked were with This New Girl and Love is for the Young and Old. And that was more Derek's decision than John's decision, although they wanted my approval. And I liked all the songs, but Love is for the Young and Old was the song because it was the best one. I knew it was. It was a great title, and no one had written a song about love is for old people. And that became the A side of the single, which was never released because I wouldn't allow them to.
And having his character as a mentor and as a guide just seemed right. I mean, that would be how you think it would play out if you had said yes.
Yeah, and to even consolidate that thought, because it was just based upon 3 days of working with Derek Taylor, how kind he was, how supportive he was, how loving he was. I developed a friendship with an author in London, a guy called Tim Quinn. And Tim Quinn has written a number of books about the Beatles. And he, I don't want to put a number on it, but I'm thinking 2 decades, who was best friends with Derek Taylor. Derek Taylor died in the mid-70s, I think. And he said that the way I described Derek Taylor was spot on. And this was a man who was his friend. And when I wrote in the book about buying Derek Taylor a record, I called Tim in London and said, what kind of music did Derek like? And he said, Motown. So I bought Derek Taylor a Motown record. Because again, I wanted to be true. I wanted to be real. I wanted not just to, if I would have said Moby Grape or Love or the Trogs, it might have been sort of right, but Motown was right. So I got Derek Taylor. I did all kinds of stuff like that, all kind of research that I could do that would help me, when I'm guessing, get as close to correct as possible.
Sheila Hughes feels like the emotional anchor. Talk about her. And was she based on somebody specific or symbolic, maybe, of home?
There was no tea room lady when I was in Apple because I was only there for the first 3 days and they hadn't hired one yet. But the beautiful thing about Sheila Hughes, who is completely made up, is she's from Liverpool because they loved people from Liverpool and they loved people in their midst who they could relate to from their early years. Sheila Hughes played by the Apple rules. I did a lot of reading about the Apple rules. The Apple rules was everything stays in the house, which is what Meghan Markle and Fergie can't keep. Everything goes out of house. People talk now, no matter about the disclaimers that you sign. So they had to be really respectful of not talking about things they saw. And they were like motherly types. Paul McCartney's housekeeper, who's talked about quite a lot in the book, Mrs. Rose, was real. I read a lot about her and her personality is intact in the book, but it was also shared with Sheila Hughes. And Sheila Hughes became Adam Bond's motherly figure in his tremendously difficult ride over the next 8 months, working with very famous people. Adam Bond was more gifted than Barry Greenfield. He could play the guitar better, but not much, just better.
Adam signs a contract without reading it. What does that moment say about youth, trust, ambition? Very common.
Yeah, and Barry Greenfield did it with his New York management company, and they stole every penny from him. You should always have a lawyer read the contract. And I'm not saying you shouldn't trust people. I'm saying that there's bad cats out there that know how to make you feel good.
When I was in radio, I said it, many would say it, the younger interns, I'll be on the air for free, man. I don't care. Like, be careful. Because they know that. They know that. They could take advantage of you.
You know, yeah, you have to. In the music business, I wrote a line when I was 17, but I've never ever finished the song. And now that I'm 75, maybe I will visit the song because I've always loved the line. And the line was, don't forget it's the music business. Don't forget where the emphasis is. It used to be the music, but now it's completely on the business. Now, the Barry Greenfield that wrote that was 17. And look what's happened. And, you know, the other song that came along that I always thought fit that song was Video Killed the Radio Star. I mean, I think Duran Duran killed music. I think hair became so important and good looks. And then the next, of course, faltering was Accutune and Auto-Tune. And so you can sing like shit, and yet it can still sound like Mariah Carey, who's also sings like shit probably in the real world and is tuned. And the brilliance of Madonna is not Madonna, it's who she hires, William Orbit. That they make her look like a diamond when really she's a zirconian, whatever the other word is in the fake diamond stuff. But it's not when the people of like Marmalade sang back in the 60s, they were singing. When Badfinger sang those songs, they were doing it. It wasn't helped by a computer. It certainly was helped by an engineer, but they had to execute.
Yeah, and if you're not a great singer, you can still be a great vocalist. You can still emote, and you can still get across those lyrics in a way that you don't need auto-tune.
Yes. And there's a million examples of that. And, Tom Waits did it all from the heart. And no one ever said you sing like shit. And people that tell me Dylan can't sing, I don't agree with that. I think Dylan has like we were discussing Murder Most Foul off air before we turned on the light. And he sings it like an old fart, but it's got so much old fart heart.
Boy, it brings chills to me every time I hear it. There's nobody else that could deliver that song but him.
I was at home in Salisbury, Rhodesia with my sister, watching television. My parents left us alone and went to a restaurant. And it came on that John F. Kennedy being assassinated. I don't know how many hours later. Could have been a day later in Rhodesia. And I remember picking up the phone, phoning the restaurant, asking to speak to my dad, and telling my dad, they've assassinated John F. Kennedy. And it was a very dark period on the planet, much like when Princess Diana died. Dark period. And then February the following year, 3-4 months later, the Beatles popped up on Ed Sullivan. And I think without the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the sadness that America was still feeling, because they loved that dude regardless of his flaws, when the Beatles popped up on February the 9th, 1964, and Ed Sullivan, America was given a reason to smile again. I want to hold your hand. I was listening to a really good YouTube video today about Hey Bulldog, and they were talking about the nonsense lyrics, and one of the dudes on the podcast said, well, I've always thought that song was John Lennon's talking about Paul McCartney and his feelings about Yoko. Some sign of solitude, and maybe he was. And I think John Lennon was here for a minute, and then 5 minutes later he was in a different place, and he could sing the song with a smile on his face with his best partner. But it's such an amazing song, Hey Bulldog, much like On the Walrus. You have no idea what he's talking about, but I've always believed John Lennon might write nonsense lyrics, but they're never nonsense.
Thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. Barry Greenfield, the author of All You Need Is Courage. Let's get into John and Yoko a little bit. The opening chapter. It ends with, quote, I was content and challenged by John Paul Jones. Derek Taylor was honest and straight with me. I had commenced my journey down the yellow brick road to Oz. In the background lay the wizard who would make things happen. The silent shadow of John Lennon loomed large. You describe a literal shiver when John and Yoko walk in. The way you describe them, almost like they shift the energy of the room. Is that intentional?
I was recording Los Angeles in 1973 when I walked into a bathroom and Harry Nilsson was in the bathroom snorting coke. Harry Nilsson then invited me back to Studio A. I was in Studio B doing my album. And for 2 hours, I worked with Harry Nilsson, having the most blissful time of my life. He was asking me about bass sounds and whether I thought the volumes were right. He was mixing Son of Dracula for the movie. It was just an amazingly normal time, like talking to Eric on his podcast. Then in walked Ringo Starr, 2 hours, 2.5 hours later. He was drunk. He was disheveled. He had a half full bottle of Jack Daniels in his hand. And he was with Richard Perry, his producer, who was also Nilsson's producer in those days, doing Nilsson Schmilsson. Eric, the room changed when Ringo walked in. It was, I became invisible. Nilsson completely ignored me. Everybody ignored me. I got up from the chair next to Harry and I went to sit in the back of the room. I sat there as the three of them talked about the parking lot at RCA, passing the bottle around, snorting coke, the three of them. And I became invisible because there was a Beatle in the room. I then excused myself and left and went back to went back to work on my song Jack and Jill. I believe that when Johnny Yoko entered the room, fame has an incredible effect on us. So if you think about how famous John Lennon was in 1968, just in the same area as him would have an effect on most everyone. Maybe not everyone, but most everyone. And that's why they liked being together so much, the four of them. When they had dinner in Abbey Road, it was just the four of them. Even Mal Evans wasn't at the table. It was just the four of them. And I remember reading about Eric Clapton saying that he was thought of as being God in England. In fact, they described him as God back in the period when he was the guitar player of note. And he said, wherever I went, I was like the king. I was loved. But when I went places with George Harrison, I became invisible because George Harrison was a Beatle. So that's why I made John have that effect. But as the book progresses, I start to go there for dinner to John and Yoko's. I start to see a different side of Yoko. John comes in the studio when I'm recording because he really wants to produce the one cover song I do, which is the Dylan song, Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. He produces it. John Paul Jones sits there quietly. He's the master of everything. And he was the reason that as it says in the book, he controlled the Beatles until Rubber Soul. And that's when Paul McCartney started driving the bus through Revolver, through Pepper, and into Abbey Road. Because John had given up the reins. He was tired. It was enough already. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 366 days in a leap year. They never, ever stopped. I just wanted to say that I wrote about John, Paul, George. I didn't write about Ringo because I never had a relationship with Ringo. I just tried to make it about, I read biographies about them. I did my research, and so it's as honest as I could have been.
Yeah, chapter 12, I want to ask you about the title. Thought is the enemy of flow. A powerful statement. What does that phrase mean to you?
When I'm writing a song, and when I'm writing a book, and when I'm talking to you, I try not to do anything but be present and drink in what I'm doing. So if you start thinking too much, the last two songs I've written are called The Monarchy and Coronary Artery Disease. And of course, they involved a lot of thought about discussing the monarchy and discussing heart failure. And again, though, I don't really try to be too analytical. I try to talk about the emotion of having an inability to breathe and the emotion of seeing what Andrew Mountbatten did to the country of England, stole, and did bad things with young girls. So I try not to think, I try to be present, and I try to share the heart and not the ego. As Quincy Jones put on the door for We Are the World, please leave your egos outside. He didn't say leave your heart outside. He said leave your ego outside. And I've always been a proponent of heart art. And that's what I mean by that. Thought is the enemy of flow.
Without giving anything away, does Adam get what he thinks he wants by the end of this story?
The book ends, Adam does 2 tours in the book. One with Joan Baez, where he does 9 dates. And then his single, which is called All You Need, All You Need Is Courage, and the album's All You Need Is Courage is successful. So he's doing Top of the Pops, he's doing other television shows, and he gets offered a tour with Donovan because Donovan was in the audience at the Marquee when he opened for the New Yardbirds because of John Paul Jones being a very close friend of Donovan's. So he goes on tour with Donovan, and the book ends with him playing London, which is the 9th date of the tour. And it goes extremely well. So I don't care about giving away stuff because it's a positive book. No one gets shot, no one gets raped, no one gets hurt, but it's real. And the night before he plays London, he has food poisoning, and he's playing Bristol, and he's throwing up. So, and he has to do an abbreviated set. So there's other things like a motor vehicle accident in the book. His dad has a heart attack in the book. There's all kinds of stuff going on, but there could easily be a part 2 of this book, because what happens after his songs do well on the radio, his songs do well on the charts, and it's not really a co-headlining bill, but it sort of is, because him and Donovan become really close. Did a lot of research on Donovan's personality and his likes and dislikes. I originally called the book All You Need Is Courage Part 1, and then I took it out because I didn't want to mislead people in case there was never a part 2, and I have no idea if there will be. Music business is either sad or glad, and I wanted to write a glad story.
When somebody closes the final page of the book, All You Need Is Courage, what do you want them thinking about their own life?
Take a chance, take a risk, don't be stupid. Listen to your heart, not your ego. Listen to yourself. Be surrounded by positive people who love you and who won't try to dismantle you, like so many do. Doesn't matter whether you're a plumber, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're a writer. Be smart. Don't have an arrogance or a flippancy about everybody's going to like your work because you like it. Doesn't happen. I get bad remarks on my YouTube. I've got like 100 YouTube videos now with my songs. They all have negative things, really cruel things on them, but they don't have mostly cruel things. They have mostly nice things because most of the world is nice. But the bad ones will seek out, especially artists, and because there's money there and it's easy money for a charlatan. And I just think you should take away from this book that here's a positive musical adventure and what's next. And please send me an email. My email's in the book, but I'll share it now. It's Barry Greenfield, Barry Greenfield at shaw.ca. And send me some love if you want.
Yeah. And if you've ever asked yourself, what if I said yes at any point in your life, this book is for you.
Thank you, Merrick. Thank you very, very much. My daughter said the same thing, and that's on the back cover, the what ifs, if you would have said yes. But it doesn't mean it would have happened that way. The song could have flopped like Jackie Lomax. Like, you don't know.
You don't know.
What's that phrase? The road seldom traveled, or the road less traveled, whatever the phrase. You never know until you walk down the road, and any road will get you there.
It's titled All You Need Is Courage, and people can get the book. We were talking quickly before we started recording. Next week, it'll be out.
You can try, but the place that's going to be the easiest to get is www.barrygreenfieldmusic. That's BARRY greenfieldmusic.com. And leave me a note there, and I'll make sure you get a signed personal copy, carry it overnight. I'm not giving the web address out for the business aspects yet because I'm not sure what it is, but barrygreenfieldmusic.com will have it on the front page. I want people to read this book who love the 60s and the Beatles, who love music and who love taking a chance. It's not a murder mystery. There's no surprises except for the journey, which is one total surprise. I don't know if it would have happened that way. Of course, I would like it to have thought it would have. But I didn't take the opportunity from John Lennon because it was the wise decision to do. I have never regretted that decision.
The Booked on Rock podcast is part of the Boneless Podcasting Network. If you're a fan of classic rock and classic film like I am, go to boneless.lovable.app to find over 20 great shows there. That's boneless.lovable.app, or just go to bookdownrock.com, the Boneless Podcasting Network. It is what you want it to be. Listen with confidence. Well, yeah, I don't know. If people don't want to get a copy after listening to this interview, I don't know what else we can do. That's it. We did it. I want to read it again after this.
Oh, wow. Well, Eric, I'm not going to flatter you, because that's kind of, I just want to say that this is not easy for me.
That's shocking to be to be a guest. You're a performer. You're up on stage.
That's because I'm performing.
Yeah.
It's because I've been doing concerts for 55, 60 years, and I'm always, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've always heard that Don Rickles always threw up before he went on stage because he was so scared. But the second you get there, and that's not really true, 5 minutes after you get there, which is more accurate, you become Barry Greenfield. And Barry Greenfield appears to be solid and confident, and wow, I just wish I had his sensibility and all that shit. But I'm just not that. I'm never sure, and I've developed this persona from working and understanding the phrase, all you need is courage. That's why I accepted your offer to do the podcast.
So happy that I've had you on for 2 times. So there's one book we haven't done. I'm trying to remember, what's the third book that we didn't
So The Wedding Band.
Right.
Yeah, which is a really special book. I'm about to start writing the screenplay for it. I really like The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler. I love the idea of performing at weddings. So The Wedding Band are 4 really close friends, 2 guys, 2 women, and they're quite successful in San Diego as a wedding band for 2 years, doing cover bands. And the protagonist, who's Baza Hyman, who's me, is also a struggling beginning songwriter. He's 25, and he goes to the band one day and says, listen, I'm tired of working in the band as a teller. Do you want to try incorporating some original songs into the set? And the band are all interested, and the bass player, who's from Nigeria, also writes original songs. And so they start adding 2 or 3 original songs to the wedding band set, which is 3 sets long, 1 hour each set, and the crowd likes them. So then they invest $200 each and make a demo. The demo gets picked up by Tropical Records, an imaginary company, and they begin a journey that lasts for 9 months that eventually goes on until the end of the book, where Baza Hyman is 75 and he looks back on the wedding band, and very proud of it.
Love these stories. Barry Greenfield, thanks again for coming on, and look forward to talking with you again.
Well, God bless you, Eric, and you're a gentleman and a scholar, and I've loved every single moment. Bye-bye.
That's it. It's in the books.